adventure with Freddie Bz's Pathetic Picks. We've got great news today. We've got Imola, the Italian Grand Prix. I can't say the entire name because it's so long. So we're just going to call it the Grand Prix that's happening in Italy. It's the Imola Grand Prix. It was rained out last year, I believe, because of heavy rains. So they're back after 2 years, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the points and how they're distributed and what they're talking about there in terms of changing points. That's one of the other things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about some drivers and what they're doing and who's changing what. And that's another thing we're going to talk about. And we're going to talk about upgrades for Formula One. So those are the things we're going to talk about of F1. And then we're also going to talk about IndyCar, because IndyCar today had their very first practice for the Indianapolis 500 that's coming up on the same day that Monaco is coming up. So it's the best day of motorsports in the world, where you get up in the morning and you can watch the Monaco Grand Prix, and then you go right into the Indy 500, and then right after the Indy 500 there's about 3 hours, and you've got the Coca-Cola or former Coca-Cola or whatever NASCAR calls that race, the 600-mile race in Charlotte, which used to be the highlight of my day, but now the highlight of my Memorial Day is two things. It's the Monaco Grand Prix, the Indy 500, and also remembering when I went to the hospital 11 years ago with a burst appendix. So I didn't get to see my guy Tony Kanaan win the Indy 500s, which was a shame, because it would have been really cool had he won it again, and he's not even racing this year. So let's go to the practice for the Indy 500. Lots of neat stuff. Of course, you got to remember, Zach Brown has a Formula One team. He also has the Arrow McLaren IndyCar team. They have several drivers there that are in the team. Scott Dixon led the charge today in a rain-shortened, only 23-minute session at Indianapolis today. So they opened up practice today at like 8:30 or so. By 9:23, it was shut down because rain was intermittent. It kept throughout the day. So about 30 people got on track, which is great. The total number of laps were 329 or so. Only one person ran more than, two people ran more than 12 laps, or three. They were, Felix Rosenquist, Kyle Kirkwood, and Scott McLaughlin all got 13 laps in. But the fastest guy so far this morning was Scott Dixon. He ran a time of 39:28. A 39:28 on a 2.5 mile track brings you to a speed of 2:29.107. So 2:29 was the top speed. Not even close. I will tell you, to my way of thinking, the 33rd qualifier to Indy will probably run about in the mid 220. So they're going to ramp it up, but they got to get their legs under them and get going. Doesn't help. Marco Andretti was second. Takuma Sato, two-time Indy winner, by the way, he is ran in third today. But yeah, 229, 228, 225 were those things. Pato O'Ward, who's won a race already this year and hasn't led a lap, was fourth. And he was the first Chevrolet driver to the highest ranking Chevrolet driver. So you have Honda engines at Indy, and you have Chevrolet engines at Indy. There's a lot of parity. They're all Dolaras is the chassis. It's kind of a spec series. You have to run a spec wing, spec rear wing. You can make some wicker bill adjustments and things like that. The cars are infinitely adjustable like a Formula One car, however, not nearly as sophisticated. And it's time for the Indy Racing League to actually come up with a new spec. One of the things I do like about Formula One is every 3 or 4 years, they change the rules, so you have to redesign a car, and everybody gets to level that playing field. At IndyCar, they've used the same Dallara chassis for probably 10 years or more. Now, the chassis is adjustable and everything, but it's the same basic car. However, now they have not a halo like the Formula One cars, but they actually have a cockpit with a windscreen, which I don't know whether I like it or not, quite frankly. But it is a little bit different. They did put on a really good show on Saturday this week, though. They ran the Indy Road Course. You might remember that if you're a Formula One fan, that Indy cars did come to the worst Formula One race in history was run at the Indy Motor Speedway. It had nothing to do with the track. It had everything to do with the tires, and that's why Formula One got a really bad taste here in the USA for several years. But now it's back, and I got a great taste. Remember, I went to Miami last weekend. Absolutely loved it. Had a great time. Great fun. Another thing I'll say about Indy, if you are a reader, if you can find a book called Spectator Sport by, I think the author is David Thom, Thom. He used to write spaghetti western novels, but he wrote this really good novel wrapped around the 1971 Indy 500. It's a great book. I read it when I was a little kid. I actually found it. It was an Avon paperback that cost $1.95 way back then. Big, thick book like that. I ended up finally finding it after about a 25-year search. Its original cover from a used bookstore, and I think I paid $20 for it. But I still have it, and I pick it up this time of year, and I probably have read it at least 4 or 5 times. And I'll probably read it again in the month of May. Really interesting book. So, Indy 500 is going on. I'll keep you apprised of that. One of the guys who I listen to on YouTube is David Land. He is a dedicated IndyCar correspondent. He's got a YouTube channel that is dedicated to IndyCar. He's probably got some pretty good insight, and he's been around long enough where he can get drivers to talk to him, and he can go around. So everybody knows he's a pretty much a YouTube journalist, but he does a really nice job. So if you can get a look at David Land, IndyCar, look him up on YouTube, and you'll get some pretty good insight. But one of the big things, probably the biggest thing that so far you can take out of this is NASCAR champion Kyle Larson, who has been a champion and everything. He's running the Indy 500, and he's doing the double, which is the Indy 500. Then he's going to get on a helicopter or plane a helicopter and go to Charlotte and race in the World 600. Last person to do that was Kurt Busch. I believe he came in 6th at Indy and got to Charlotte. And prior to that, Robbie Gordon, who almost won the Indy 500, came within 2 or 3 laps of winning the Indy 500, and lost, got on a plane, got down to Charlotte, and raced in the World 600. So you can still do the double. Guys that I'm kind of looking at in the Indy is Helio Castroneves. Is doing a one-off, Indy only, trying to go for his 5th win. Don't count him out. He's got a good car, good sponsor, good money behind him, and he's a great race driver. So that's that for your Indy update for today. So let's talk about Formula One. So we're going to Imola. We've got upgrades. Red Bull's got upgrades. McLaren upgrades. Aston Martin upgrades. Mercedes needs upgrades, but everybody is bringing upgrades in the top 5, and everybody in the bottom 5, those bottom 5 teams, they're racing for the midfield. And they're bringing upgrades too, so everybody should be pretty good. I'm looking at Haas to be improved. I'm hoping Aston Martin with Fernando Alonso upgrades start taking hold, because they're losing that tiny little grasp that they have on being maybe the 4th or 5th fastest team out there. So right now I think it's still Red Bull. I think Ferrari is 2nd, McLaren 3rd with a Lando Norris win for the ages, if you will, at Miami. And then, what did I say? I said Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren, Aston Martin. 5th, I don't know. 5th could be Mercedes. It could be a Red Bull V-Carb. We don't know, because they did really well at Miami. Yuki got points both races, and Daniel Ricciardo did also, although he sucked in the regular race. He had to take a 3-grid place penalty, and then he just got the setup wrong. And that's reminiscent of Lewis Hamilton at the last sprint race in China, who again podiumed in China and just stunk it up in the long race. So, one good thing about Parc Ferme opening up is you can make adjustments on your car. The other thing about Parc Ferme opening up is you can make the wrong adjustments on the car. And Lewis Hamilton and Daniel Ricciardo both did that in the Miami race and also in the China race. So everybody's bringing in upgrades, which is pretty good. Which leads me to what the midfield is fighting for. So Alpine and Williams are the 2 teams currently that do not have points, although I believe Ocon might have gotten a point. I'd have to double check. Sorry, I didn't do my research before that. So maybe, but I know, you know it is. Alcon did get their first points for Alpine, pardon me, and he got him in the sprint race, and good for him. That was great. Leave Stake, Sauber, and then Williams without a point. So, what do they have to race for? Well, every point counts. And currently the breakdown as points is you pay to the 10th spot. And to give you a quick rundown, you get 25 for first, and then it drops 7 points to 18 for second, then 3 to 15 for third. So there's a 10-point spread right there from first to third. Then 12, 10, 8, 6, 4, 2, 1. So 25, 18, 15, 12, 10, 8, 6, 4, 2, 1. That's your top 10. I would propose that you go to the top 13 and points, and F1 is looking at maybe the top 12, spreading points out. It gives the midfield something to race for, other than pride, because every point counts. Kind of like Major League Baseball. Everybody goes, well, they play 161 games. Yeah, but every game counts. When it comes down to the last game of the season and you're running for the playoffs, you know that every point counts. So my proposal would be to not change the top 7. So you would still have 25, 18, 15, 4, 5, 25, 18, 15, 12, 10, and 8. That's to 6. And then it would change at 7, and 7 would now get 7 points instead of 6. And then 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 would get 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1 points. Now, what does that do? That takes somebody who is a perennial midfielder or back of the midfield. It gives them hope. They know that when they line up and they're lining up 17th, that their chances of winning that day are slim and none. It's just the nature of Formula One racing, and because the cars are the stars. If you don't have the best car, and while the drivers are all elite drivers, and there's not a driver out there, even Logan Sargent and Lance Stroll are elitely and exceptionally good race drivers in these cars, okay? But their cars are really the stars in this, and that's why there's so much money, time, and effort put into development and these upgrades. If there wouldn't, you just run the car, same car you ran at the beginning of the year, okay? Back in the old days when I was in college, I was on a race team, and we didn't do many changes to our Formula Ford. I think mid-season we put a new fresh engine in it. But other than that, there really weren't any aerodynamic changes. We did shock changes, and that's about it. Changed the gear ratios in the box because of tracks. But other than that, not like a Formula One car where, you're changing tiny wicker bills to get aerodynamics into the car. So, having said that, drivers need something to shoot for. So if you pay from 11, 12, and 13, it's like the top 3 of the midfield, the top 3 of the back of the thing. So they are racing for some points that could be significant at the end of the year. And if you consider what those points do, the champion gets the biggest garage, followed by next. So there's a whole hierarchy that happens in Formula One based on your points that you earned the previous year. One other thing that's interesting is that your super license that you have to pay for is based on the number of points. The more points you earned as a driver, the more you have to pay, which sounds kind of counterintuitive. So, but that's pride. So the Red Bull doesn't have a problem paying out $2 million for Max's super license, where Williams is paying $2,000 for Logan Sargent's super license. So those are some of the differences that you'll find. So here's where I think is going to happen. You're going to see great upgrades. I think Red Bull is at the point where they have not peaked, but they're coming to the top of the mountain. Everybody else is catching up to Red Bull. So the hard part about being a champion in any sport is you don't know how high you have to raise the bar, is what I always say. And if you want to be a champion, if you want to be good at anything, it's kind of like being a race driver. First you got to learn to go fast, then you got to learn to race, and then you got to learn to win. Well, Red Bull knows how to go fast, they know how to race, and they know how to win. The other teams are learning how to go fast, they're learning how to race now, and then thankfully, Lando Norris learned how to win. So he's going to become, and this is the first of many wins for Lando Norris, I'm pretty sure. So what I think you're going to see is a deceleration in Red Bull's evolution of this design, and you're going to see Ferrari, which is catching up, McLaren, Aston Martin, Mercedes should catch up. V-Carb is using a lot of last year's Red Bull designs, but they're an independent team. They're doing their own thing. Haas has done an amazing job, and I would say in the midfield, Haas is probably the most interesting team because nobody thought at this age of the season that they would be out of last place. Williams has cars that are fast in a straight line. They just got to work on their cornering. I don't think it's Logan Sargent nor Albon's problem. I think it's a car problem. And I think Sauber's is trying to be competitive. One of the drivers they know that one of the drivers is gone because they signed Hulkenberg. Bottas is probably the best bet to maybe keep his job there, but maybe he goes to Haas next year because I think Magnussen is probably in his last year. The driver's market is ever evolving and changing. I would say that Sainz was going to Mercedes, but I think he's sticking around waiting for the Red Bull ride. And I think if Max decides to leave because Mercedes will pay him $150 million a year, then Sainz goes to Red Bull. And then what do you do with Checo? I don't know. It's going to be just a crazy, crazy, silly season, and we'll see how that goes on. So here's my pathetic picks for Imola. I still think that Red Bull's going to probably win the race, and I think Max is going to be the winner of the race. I think you're going to have a huge, huge, huge push with Ferrari, and I would not be surprised if Leclerc comes in second. And I would say that Sainz might even come in third. So I'm going to give it to Max, and I'm going to give it to the two Ferraris for the podium for Imola because this is such an important race for the Italians and Ferrari because it's a home race, which is super cool. So there you have it, Freddie Bz pathetic picks, a little bit of insight into Formula One, more to come. I'll see you later. Ta-ta for now.